As you know, hiring and engaging staff takes up a lot of our bandwidth as leaders. So it's a really important topic, and I wanted to give you a lot of goods that you can take away and use when the time is right for you back at your place of business. So first of all, I'm Jocelyn Kessler. I'm from the ASPCA. I've been there for 8 years as of this December. I've been there for 8 years, and the entire time I've been in a high-quality, high-volume spay-neuter program, and we also provide basic, what we call primary pet care. So we offer primary pet care in underserved communities. So all of our services are free and low cost and pretty high volume. Between those two programs in New York and Los Angeles, we served about 75,000 animals last year. And we're opening in Miami and the Bronx in the coming matter of months. And so that number just keeps going up. There's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of growth. So this has been on my mind, thinking about expansion and bringing on new employees. So this is a really timely topic to refresh my own self. So now enough about me. Who do we have in the room? So who do we have as like you're the head of your organization? Okay, there's a lot of you guys at the head of your organization who are sort of in the middle people leaders of some sort, directors, managers. All right, good, good, awesome. And who works with this, and these might be the same people I realize, who oversees volunteers? Got volunteers too, okay. So a lot of this stuff, depending on your situation, could also apply to volunteers. So we'll try to integrate that since I know a lot of y'all work with volunteers. So the anchor for this section, and we have a couple of sections to go through, but the anchor for this section is, behavioral interviewing as a concept, like why it works, what is it, why does it work, some steps that you can take to attract and hire the best candidates, and also putting behavioral interviewing to work for you on your team. So a disclaimer I have is that this is not, there's a lot of legal considerations when it comes to hiring and interviewing, and a lot of legal sort of pitfalls that you can fall into when you're doing hiring and people on your team are doing hiring. So just keep in mind there are some great resources to keep you out of trouble, and the EEOC's website is really awesome. But then also you have to keep in mind we have New York State, and in our case at the ASPCA, the city of New York also has layers of hiring laws and practices that are enforceable. So kind of just keep in mind when you are cutting your own people loose with hiring and interviewing that there's a lot of great resources out there. The EEOC is one, but that's federal. You also want to keep in mind your city and state. So what's the hard part about bringing on quality people? What kind of challenges you guys run into? Yell it out. Yeah. It sure is. It's a big commitment when you say you're hired, right? It's scary. It's apprehensive. You want to really, get as much information as you can and make a good decision. What else for you all out there? Yeah, you're stuck with a comp model that may or may not be as attractive as it could be. For sure, in nonprofit, municipal positions, sometimes you have control over pay adjustments, sometimes you don't. What else? Yeah.
Spend a lot of time, phone interview, in-person interview, send out the paperwork, first shift, no show.
Yes, it is brutally time consuming, and sometimes the choice that you made doesn't work out for whatever reason. Maybe they no-show, that's actually, they're doing you a favor. If that person no-shows on their first day, they just saved you a ton of time, in fact. So you should actually send them a little thank you note. Yeah?
Take the time to train them, and then it turns out that you can't use them because they cannot learn quickly.
Yes. Yeah, so maybe if you made a bad hire. Like, that's always a risk. And these techniques that we're going to talk about today will not prevent you from making a bad hire. What these do is just maximizes your chances. You're going to get some dogs. You just are. And it's okay, you know, you make hiring mistakes. Sometimes the employee makes the decision that it was the wrong hire. Sometimes you have to make that decision. But you really do need to hire slowly and fire as fast as you possibly can. And I realize some of you are in environments where that can be really hard. So making a good decision or maximizing your chances of success on the front end is super, super important. So other things, you know, it's just a lot of pressure. You're short-staffed. You've got kennels to clean. You've got animals to spay or neuter. You've got adoptions to make. People are coming in. You've lost a couple of people. You maybe got farther behind than you wanted to. And now you're feeling a lot of pressure to make a hiring decision and you need a warm body. Sometimes you just did not prepare for having an opening. And now you're a little bit behind the 8 ball when the time comes when you find yourself with an opening. Sometimes we just are winging it a little bit. And, you know, I had a high up person at the ASPCA tell me that when she shakes somebody's hand, she knows if she's going to hire them or not. That's great. I am not psychic or telepathic, or I don't know what that is. But I like to get the right amount of information, not too much information, but just the right amount of information to make an informed decision and to really adequately assess a candidate. So personal biases, you know, we tend to hire people like us, you know, and the more that you can break out of that, the better off ultimately in the long run you will be. Trusting too much. Either because somebody you know and trust referred someone to you or said they're a great person, or because, you know, their resume looks great, they went to the same school as you did. You know, things like that can give us this sort of false sense of security about a candidate. It doesn't mean that you're wrong about the person being a great person, but it could be that you haven't adequately assessed them for the position that you have open that you expect them to do or that you need to have done. And I got this 40% of resumes misrepresent to some degree. That's a high number. So making sure that you're doing your homework and your due diligence is important. Talking too much, that's actually my problem. That's why I do conferences, to get out of my system. And the 80-20 rule is they should be talking 80% of the time, if at all possible. I love talking about my program. I can get rolling talking about ASPCA since the beginning of time, before the Civil War. And at the end of the interview, I've had a wonderful conversation with myself. So be really mindful of that. Make sure that you're prepared so that the candidate is talking and you're learning as much information as you can to make an informed decision. So why behavioral interviewing? Who does it now? Who like knows what this is and does it now? A couple of you. Some people call it situational interviewing. Some people call it behavioral. I originally learned about this from Target, and they hire a lot of people. I was a store manager in Burlington, North Carolina, of a Target store, and when the holiday season came, we had to hire I think 6 million people in about a month. And so they have it really down pat, and they use this very similar template. I sent out a sample, and I've got some samples here, and I'm going to post that too. So don't worry if you want to write on your copy or something. I'm going to make the documents all available that you have here online for you to grab. And you can always reach out to me if you want something or have a question. I'm totally at your service. So the past performance is the best indicator. It's not, what do they say in stocks? There's like a disclaimer when it's the stock market that does not necessarily predict future returns. Past performance doesn't predict how much money you're going to make on this stock in the future. That is true, but it's also the best indicator that you have. So the person's past performance, what they've done in similar situations to what they're going to encounter at your organization, is the best indicator you have of how they're going to behave in your environment when the time comes. So what it does is it assesses their competency in the skills that you've identified as being essential for the role. So you're picking the skills, and then you're matching the questions that you ask to those skills that you want. I know it sounds kind of hard if you haven't done it before, but it will walk through it. It helps uncover embellishments, or just like when somebody's maybe stretched the truth a little bit about their level of responsibility, the kind of roles that they've had. It helps you really kind of cut through some of the crap. Not all of it. You got a sociopath sitting across from you, good luck. Helps identify areas of opportunity before they start the job. So, right, there's no angels, right? There's not an angel out there. I'm not looking for an angel. I'm not looking for somebody who's absolutely perfect. But it really helps me if I've identified a couple of areas that I know I'm going to have to invest some extra time in before that person even starts. So I can plan for it. I can say, you know what, this person's a little bit rusty in this one area. I know that from the interview that this could be a challenge. So I'm going to make sure that I talk to them about it right when they start during their onboarding. Not that they have to be perfect. If you uncover a little bit of a red flag, you know, you'll be able to probe through it, but don't expect to find angels. In fact, if you go through a whole interview and someone appears to be an angel, you probably have a problem on your hands. So it also just, as I said, maximizes your chances of hiring a good candidate for the position. So the steps for success are pretty simple. You write a solid JD, identify the core competencies for that specific role. So what are the most important competencies to you that this person have? Create a little interview guide. I have the sample that's circulating around for you. You definitely don't have to use anything that looks remotely like that, but if it saves you time, great. Ace the interview. So prepare, have the right environment, have a great interview with the candidate, learn what you need to learn, and then evaluate each interviewee promptly when you're done. Especially if you think that position might be open for a length of time. You're interviewing candidates over quite some time. It really helps to do your little assessment as quickly after the interview as possible. And if there's multiple people who interviewed the candidate, syncing up on your feedback and getting that together at the end. So the job description, what skills must you have? So when I first started at the ASPCA a long time ago, I was looking at some job descriptions around the organization, and for us, we have a senior vet assistant, which is for our spay-neuter surgery, high-volume spay-neuter surgery program. We have SVAs. They're non-licensed. It's a physical job. It's customer service, and it's very physical. They're lifting dogs, big dogs. They're putting them in cages all the way down here. They're in a tight space because it's a mobile program. So it's a difficult job. Plus, they have to drive a ginormous truck mobile clinic. So there's a lot of things going on with that role. And the job description said, must have 3 to 5 years of animal handling experience. What's wrong with that? Anything? Right. Like, I don't know what that even really means, first of all. Like, what kind of animal handling experience? And really, we've got skills that are hard to find. Somebody who's willing to drive a 40,000-pound vehicle in New York City, and you care that they've had 5 years of handling animals? Like, you got bigger fish to fry. Tofu fish to fry. So, soy fish, I guess. So make sure that you're realistic, especially if you're in an area. I know some of y'all are in small markets, small communities. You don't have a huge pool of candidates to draw from. And be realistic and only require what you need to, because candidates, if you cast a wider net, you'll get more candidates. You don't want it too wide. You just want it the right wide. Okay? If your net is like this, then you might have, just crazy people who apply, who aren't qualified at all. But people who are really looking at the job description and assessing their skills and experience to what you're asking for will select out. And you may not want that. So be careful there. And which stuff is preferred? Avoid fluff or excessive detail. Again, you know, the ASPCA, it's a big organization. We've got human resources departments and all kinds of stuff. And we had 9, 10-page job descriptions with every possible task a person would ever have to perform listed on that JD. And you want to make that JD something that someone can really see themselves doing and that sounds fun and interesting and like a cool job. Avoid jargon. We have the HQHVSN, we had NSNP, we're pros at acronyms and crazy jargon. So try to avoid that jargon, especially if you're casting that little bit wider net so that people aren't intimidated by your job. And then anything that's unusual or, you know, just sort of out of the ordinary, late nights, early mornings, weekends, things like that, just go ahead and put them in there. Driving, lifting, driver's licenses, stuff. And then just ask yourself, when you read through it, is this a job that you would want to do? If it's not, you probably want to just take one more pass. And then identify your core competencies. So what are they? For that SVA, Senior Vet Assistant I was telling you about, customer service is probably the #1 thing. Animal handling is super important, but I can teach somebody fear-free, you know, low-stress animal handling techniques, maybe some, you know, snappy dog, snappy chihuahua handling techniques. We can teach people that. We can't teach people a willingness and desire to serve. They need to bring that with them. You're not going to be able to beat it into them. You're not going to be able to sweet talk it into them. People in our organization have to want to serve, and so we need to be able to tease that out of them in an interview. So these are just other examples of things that you might choose as being core competencies. And I would keep it to like 4 or 5 of your most important, and if there's 2 or 3, that's even better, because you can focus all of your questions on just those 2 or 3 in the interview and really probe into those areas and get a good assessment. There's other things that are nice to haves, of course, and if you're looking at 2 candidates that seem similar, you know, if they have more of those things that were nice to haves for you, that tips the scales in their favor and you know what to do. So create an interview guide. I can't tell you how many times as a new manager I winged it. And guess who was more prepared when we sat down in the interview? The interviewee or me? They were. They were much more prepared than me. And so just taking some time before you start to really prepare yourself. What are you really trying to assess? Can we create a guide or 2 guides? You know, when I worked at Target, there were 2. There was an A and a B, and every single candidate got interviewed by 2 different people, the 2 guides. They assessed the exact same core competencies in 2 different ways, 2 different interviewers. Even if interviewer A couldn't stand the candidate, they went to interviewer B and got that second one. That's just how they did it. So you can make, you know, based on the size of your organization and the resources you have, you can decide if that's a good idea for you or not. But creating at least 1 interview guide helps you in so many ways, because you've got your core competencies, you're asking questions that get you to those answers, and if you are in the process, if the candidate's in the process of answering and they're not answering, you know, this is what I'm trying to assess. They're going down a path that is not helping me assess their willingness and desire to serve others. So I need to put a lid on it. I need to back up, and I'm going to ask them again, or I'm going to ask them for a different example, and don't be afraid to do that. It's completely fine to say, you know what, that's not exactly what I had in mind. Let me ask it in a different way and get them back on the right track. You know what you're trying to learn. So you can guide the interview much better if you have this guide available to you. And I also use a situation behavior outcome. So I tell the candidates right up front, hey, I'd like you to think, for each question, I'd like you to think about a specific situation, a specific business, you know, work situation or school if they're really new to the job force. I'd like you to think of a specific example from work or school for each question. And then when you're ready, tell me a little bit about the situation and what your role was in it, what you did, what you said, what you thought, and then in the end, how it turned out. So I set the tone for them of how I ask the questions so they know what I'm looking for. That way, if they go sideways because they're nervous or whatever and I correct them, it doesn't completely freak them out. So situational questions, and those of you who do this already know that there's the situational questions almost always sound the same. Tell me about a time when, okay? What's the difference between that and this? What would you do if? Yes. One's based on experience, one is hypothetical. What's wrong with hypothetical? They can probably figure out what you want to hear, right? Well, I would be amazing. I would be Superman, woman. I would say all the right things and do all the right things. It's much easier to flub through an answer if it's just a hypothetical situation. And a lot of times people will go down that path because they don't immediately think of something specific, and I stop them. I stop them and I say, you know what I'm really looking for is a specific situation. If you need a moment, you know, I'm here all week. So I give them an opportunity to reset, to think about it, and give me a specific situation. I don't just let them go on and on and on about the amazing thing that they would do. So one of the great things about the situational questions that oftentimes the really good ones cover multiple competencies on your list, or they end up revealing things about those competencies that you didn't even know. So a sample is, tell me about the last time a coworker or a customer or a client became upset with you. So this is just a, you know, when was the last time? It doesn't have to be the biggest time, the worst time, the scariest time, just the last time. And this kind of thing it could get to interpersonal skills, it could get to their communication, ability to handle conflict, you know, building relationships, building trust. Sometimes it's demonstrating accountability. They're taking responsibility for things. And so the red flag answer would be they blame the other person, right? So this is kind of the things that you're listening for when they say, well, there was this time. And when they answer, a red flag is they don't take responsibility for the problem in the relationship at all, or for the bump in the road that they hit, or they don't see themselves as at all responsible as one of the people in the conversation. A good answer might be they focus on how they addressed it, you know, in their answer, and they fix the problem without placing blame. That's a good answer. And then a great answer might be they admitted they caused it. They took responsibility. They went back and they made things right with the person. They apologized, and the relationship was able to move forward. And so that's, as the interviewer, these are the kinds of things that you're listening for when they're talking. If you're prepared, you can do that. So another sample, tell me about a time you knew you were right, but you still had to follow protocol. You still had to follow your boss's direction. This one is really hard. People hate answering this. So this can be really hard. Now, one of the things about both of these questions are sort of negative. Kimberly Smith is in the back of the room. Raise your hand, Kimberly. Kimberly, I often interview candidates with her at the ASPCA, and she always makes me put positive questions in where people can talk about positive situations and make them shine, and it's really smart. It's smart to have a balance, and it's smart for the opener one to be a little bit of a softball, you know, sort of an easy one that's really positive. Tell me about a project you worked on where you really felt good about the result. Something like that. That's great. That's sort of a smooth on-ramp into some of the more challenging questions that get to what a person is like under stress. Because, do you have any stress in your environment? Yeah. Yeah. So you want to know, how does the person handle, you know, when you have all the time in the world to think about something and make the right choice, you can make the right choice, but no one ever has that. So this is where we are. So in this one, this is professional maturity, ability to follow directions, sometimes the ability to lead others to do the right thing, even when you're not around. So this is a really, I think, strong and deep question. So a red flag would be they found a way around it, you know, because they were right and the boss was wrong. You sometimes get some really crazy stuff. Sometimes people are asked to do illegal things. But that's rare. I mean, most of the time, people understand it, and they understand that they need to adjust, you know, what their assumptions are, and be part of an organization that they don't always agree with, but actually toe the line. A good is they follow the directive and later raise the issue with their boss. And I think great is they not only followed it, but they were able to support it and get other people to follow it too. They still want to go back and tell you why they had an issue with it. But if they can take a leadership role and not, you know, causing the coffee clatch gripe fest, but actually if they have an example like that, that's somebody you really want in your organization. So probing questions. The one thing about interviewing is that if somebody, you know, I advocate asking everybody the same basic set of questions for one opening. It allows you to most accurately assess across candidates if you keep the same interview guide. You can tweak it. If the question isn't working for you, feel free to adjust the questions a little bit, or the way that you ask them a little bit. If you sense the candidates are confused by the question or they trip up on it, sometimes that happens to me and I have to change the way I'm asking. But if you can, ask everybody basically the same questions, but if somebody throws you a line that's interesting, follow it. You know, go ahead and follow it. If somebody brings up something, you know, that you're like, oh, tell me more about that conversation that you had with that coworker, you know, or tell me why you made that decision with that client. Did you ever, you know, did you partner with anybody? Like, how did that come about? Go ahead and probe and get off track. Don't just be robotic in your interview guide. If somebody throws you a line that's interesting, go ahead and follow it. And make sure that you clarify their role and their responsibility in that situation. Sometimes you're interviewing somebody for a leadership position, their resume appears that they manage staff, but then when you're talking to them, you realize that they might have been just like a lead that didn't have any hiring, firing decisions, didn't have performance management responsibility, etc. If that's important to you, make sure that you're probing and getting to that answer. So for each one, do you understand the situation? Who's involved? Does the situation fit the question? If not, ask them to pause and think of another one. Do you know what specific role they played? Were they the supervisor? Were they just one of the team? Were they just a follower? What was their specific role? In LA, I actually work in Los Angeles now, and everybody in Los Angeles name drops. It's the craziest thing. That never really happened in New York, but in LA, they'll like name drop famous people, and you're like, so what was your role? Like, when you call Katherine Heigl, Katherine, like, you're throwing me off. I want to know what your position was in that. And then it turns out you're just a soldier in this, you know, in this organization. That's totally fine, but you want to know that, and sometimes people will inflate their role. So just be, you know, be respectful, but make them answer. Do you know what they thought about the situation that they were in? Like, what was their internal processing that they thought about the situation? And then what were their actual behaviors? What did they say? What did they do in the end? And then, do you know what happened? And so it helps me to just have SBO right on my page, on my interview guide, so that as they're telling me the situation, I can write a couple bullets. They're telling me about what they did, I can write a couple bullets. When they're telling me what the outcome is, I can put that on there. I will remember after the fact when I'm evaluating them. And then ask for another example. Again, I can't stress that enough. If they don't answer your question, make them answer the question if you possibly can. Sometimes the candidate is just like, I am blank. I'm empty, I can't answer it, even if you come back to it at the end. And you can move on, but that's a little bit problematic depending on the role. So evaluating candidates afterwards, try to score them as quickly as possible, again, so you don't forget. And I like to rate the answers like 1 to 5, just in terms of general performance. It doesn't have to be very scientific, but just like from not very good to really good, where did they fall in that answer? But also, what's important too is the scope, because you could ask somebody that exact same question. Tell me about a time you knew you were right but you still had to follow directions. You could ask that question to an ACT or a kennel associate, and you could ask that question to a director of ops candidate. Same question, the answers should be very different, right? The scope of their answer, the scope of their example that they're sharing, and their situation should be really different. So if you're interviewing somebody for a director candidate and the scope of their answers is really low and you're getting multiple, you know, and what I mean by scope is like, you know, you tell me about a time you had to address a challenging employee performance situation. And they say, well, Junior was late twice. And the third time I actually had to sit down and talk to him. And he was mad. He denied he was late. Right? So that, what scope is that? High or low? Low. If they were a brand new first-time supervisor, assistant manager, or team leader, might be medium. Might be on the high side if they were brand spanking new. But if that's a director candidate and they're going to have to do that by 9 o'clock on their first day, you got issues. So the money hiring tips that I have for you guys are these. Postings should be fresh, okay? Does anybody have high turnover positions? Got some high turnover positions? We have high turnover positions, right? So where are people looking for work these days? Online. What if your posting says 90 plus days ago? What's the problem there? Nobody's going to apply either. They think it's bogus. They don't think you're actually hiring for that position. And it looks like you're actually a little bit desperate if that position is still open. So that very well may be true, but your candidates should not know that. So people don't want to waste their time. It takes a lot of time to apply for positions. Please don't make them waste their time. Give them a fresh posting. If the job is open, make sure it's not more than 30 days old. Post on Indeed.com. If you don't post anywhere else, and I'm talking about unlicensed positions, if you have good like industry places for licensed positions, that's different. But for unlicensed positions, Indeed is really where you need to be. And if you have a website that interfaces with Indeed, it'll happen automatically, which is great. But you also have a little bit less control because Indeed, you'll have to make some changes to get it to recognize it as a new posting and refresh that date. So you kind of have to trick Indeed. But most people will go there at some point if they're looking for work. So make sure that you're at least on there if you have these types of positions. And don't post jobs you don't intend to fill. Again, I know I keep airing dirty ASPCA laundry, but we have had in the past positions they call evergreen. And it's just because they're high turnover, so they just leave them up all the time, even if there's not a real opening. And that's just wrong. I think that's wrong. Candidates spend a lot of time looking for work. It's hard looking for work. It's stressful. It can be demoralizing. And to have positions open that you have no intent to call people and hire and bring them in is baloney. So please, please don't do that. Make contact within a couple of business days. If you're going to post a position, don't post a position and go on vacation for 3 weeks, right? Post a position and somebody should be checking the applications that are coming in and reaching out to people within a couple of days. And those high turnover positions, you're competing with Walmart, you're competing with Costco, you're competing with Target, you're competing with the grocery store and retail jobs and all kinds of stuff, server jobs at restaurants. You're competing with everybody in these unlicensed sort of entry-level positions. And so you've got to be fast. And so don't mess around. Contact candidates and also have a really open mind. Yes?
Do you recommend responding to all applications?
If you can, I mean, we put in there you'll only be contacted if we have an application system that actually tells people that we did receive it. It's a confirmation, which I think is really nice because sometimes you're like, what if something happened? What if it went into outer space? What if they didn't get it? So I think that's nice, but not everybody has that. You might just have ability to post and they actually have to submit some other way. If you don't have that, that's fine. You can send postcards if you're able to. I don't think candidates necessarily expect that. If you say in there, we're only going to contact candidates that, we, meet our whatever. So I would say if you can, that's awesome because, the thing about interviewing candidates and in our line of work is people want to work at your organization for a bunch of reasons. They apply to your organization for a lot of reasons, but they're always potential supporters of your organization. Treat them like a donor. Treat them like a client. Don't treat people coming to you looking for work disrespectfully. And try not to waste their time. I mean, I know that it's, with us, when it happens, it's always unintentional, but it happens. You post a position and then somebody's out sick or something and it just stays out there and dies slowly out there in the ether. Try to avoid that stuff, and you will get better candidates. Now, the easiest job to fill is the one that never gets vacant. So that's what I want to talk about a little bit next, because they come on board with you, that you've only done like 10% of the work, right? You really need to onboard, train and onboard and set expectations for that candidate very, very clearly, and bring them into your organization the right way so that you're setting them up for success. And one of the ways that we do that is by really good, meaningful one-to-one conversations with their supervisor. I know a lot of you guys are at the top of the organization, and you have supervisors who are managing frontline staff. And so this is super, super important. And so today we're just going to spend some time talking about one-to-one conversations with your staff, and why do they work, and what are they, and what are they not. Tips to get the most out of this time, and some power questions for you to use for yourself. And one of the things that you have is a worksheet to help you, because again, I know I'm talking like a speed demon. So what a one-on-one is and what it isn't. So this is about fostering professional maturity and professional development with your staff. This is not a check-in on whether or not they did the list of items that you asked them to do last week. The check-ins are important, and you have to do those and follow through on assignments and things like that. Super important, but that's just not what we're talking about today. This is a different kind of conversation, and it happens less frequently. A conversation like this might only happen quarterly, depending on what your staffing is like and your structure. It might even just be mid-year and at the end of the year, so this might only happen a couple times a year. And just having your door always open really does not leave room for these kinds of conversations. So what people want. What people want is competent job instruction. Direction is, generally what that is. They want to be able to do it independently. They want to be able to do it in their way to the extent that that's possible. To be informed about stuff that's relevant to them and their work. People want to be in on things. That's a big part of job satisfaction, is that they know, what are we doing, where are we going, and why are we doing that. Recognition and praise for a job well done. And they want to work for a leader, not a boss, who sees themselves as someone whose job it is to make them successful. That's our role as leaders, and we want people to feel that way. And what's in it for you? So what's in it for you is they're more engaged in their work. A more engaged employee. What happens to a more engaged employee? What's good about that? They stay longer on average, for sure. They're more productive. They do a better job. They might work independently better. They're happier at work. They treat your clients better. They treat the public better if they're interacting with adopters. Sorry?
More committed.
They're more committed, yes. They might go that extra mile for you, even when you're not looking. We were talking recently about a manager who, when she's in our clinic, everybody straightens up. And when she's gone, it's like a zoo. It's crazy town, right? And that's a real problem. That's a sign of disengaged employees. And there was a Gallup poll that goes out every single year to ask people nationally. They ask gazillions of people about their engagement levels, and they have 12 questions that the Gallup poll asks. And every year they find that something like 50% of adult workers in the United States are actively disengaged. Actively disengaged. I call that they quit and stayed. Like, that is dragging your whole organization down. And that is a huge percentage of adult workers in the United States are actively disengaged. And then another like 25% or something are just sort of passively disengaged. And engagement is this small, 30% or something like that. It's really incredible when you read the results. And they've been doing it for years and years, and it barely changes. So they take ownership of their own development also. And that's really important, because you don't want somebody who just comes to work and expects you to move them through their career for them. and that they just go from individual contributor to supervisor to director, and then someday they're going to have your job, and it's all going to be because you dragged them there kicking and screaming. So you want them to take ownership of their development. They own it. They're in charge of it. They have realistic expectations about their growth and their promotability, salary expectations. They're more realistic. People complain about millennial guys, you know, in the workforce and how they just expect everything to be handed to them. And having these kinds of conversations with them helps with those expectations, helps ground them in reality so that they're not as disappointed when they find out that not everybody got a trophy. Just kidding. That was for Ariel. She's not in here. She was complaining about, she's one of our colleagues who was complaining that she went to a conference and they badmouth millennials the whole time, and she is one. But she's like actually a 60-year-old in a millennial's body. They grow more professionally mature. So professional maturity is super important to all of us, and people need help with that. They don't just always get there on their own. And if you actively help them become more professionally mature, you will have a much better employee. And they'll go on to say good things about you and your organization long after they're gone and moved on to something else. If you're worried about them getting sort of too big for their britches and losing them to another organization or to a better opportunity, don't. It's worth it. So tips for successful one-on-ones. So the first is, you know, the basics of what you would think. Be present. We have crazy worlds. So try to carve out that time. If you can't carve out an hour and a half, 2 hours, don't. 15 super focused minutes is better than an hour of shenanigans, of emails coming through, the phone ringing, people walking in and asking questions. So if you can, just carve out a small amount of time that you can to be really fully present and focused on them, and let them drive the conversation as much as possible. Include praise, specific praise when you can, and demonstrate genuine curiosity. What you want to do is not ask leading questions or like gotcha questions. You want to demonstrate genuine curiosity about them, their development, their goals, and ask thought-provoking questions. So you want to expand their critical thinking. Sometimes they're just bringing you problem after problem after problem after problem, and they want you to solve it. And this one-on-one time is that time for you to help them solve their own problems. And also to articulate their feelings. Sometimes they're just frustrated, right? They're just frustrated about a specific situation. They get stuck in it. We all do. You know, I've been in a leadership role for 30 years almost. And I get stuck in problems, and I can't critical think my way out sometimes because I'm frustrated or stressed. And so everyone does, and you're helping that employee. Like, what do you really, what's really getting at you? What's a way that you can fix that? And then you're adding value by bringing up your own knowledge, your own experience. You're sharing with them what you've been through. You're challenging them to think, to be better, to solve. And you're being more relatable. You're not a machine who's just pointing out work that needs to be done. And part of not being a machine is revealing yourself and learning about them. And it requires some time and space. That doesn't happen automatically. Not going to happen on day one. It actually has to be cultivated. Trust has to be cultivated. And the bonus is you can get feedback from them too. It's not a one-way street. You can ask for it. So just for a minute, just think about somebody on your team who you might have a one-on-one with after you leave this conference next week or the week after, and ask yourself some questions. The first is, do I know why this employee works here rather than elsewhere? For those people on your team, why do they work there? They've got other choices. Why you? Do they demonstrate passion and enthusiasm for their work? Do I know how satisfied they are with various aspects of their work situation, whether it's comp, their coworkers, their level of responsibility, their environment? Do I know if the employee's current work is aligned with his or her long-term goals? You might have an opening coming down the lane, and it'd be nice to know about it a little bit ahead of time. Be nice to have a heads up. And do I proactively support this employee's development through training and challenging opportunities? So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. If you answered yes to all of those for the person, that's awesome. You can kind of go to the next level and go deeper. If you don't, that's a great place to start. So in setting the agenda, they drive the agenda, right? We already said that they're the ones, as much as possible, if they're at that point, they drive the agenda in a one-on-one. What do they want to talk about? You know, and these are some examples that you can give them if they're not sure. Because I do hear the complaint, well, I try to do one-on-ones, but then they just come empty-handed, and they just look at me and wait for me to say something. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. I don't like doing one-on-ones.
Come empty-handed or come with a lot of negativity, which obviously is a problem, and that spreads. And that was one of the questions I had about how to deal with people with constant negativity that spreads to others.
Yes, we do actually have some goods for that. So work problems, absolutely, absolutely, and challenging people to be part of the solution can be challenging. And listening to the negativity can be really challenging. And let's just face it, sitting in front of you in your air-conditioned office with like a nice beverage can be a lot easier than working. So they could just come in and want to hang out with you all day long, talk about everything that's bothering them, all their aspirations, because it's way easier than cleaning kennels. So you want to be focused, and you want to keep redirecting them, because your time is valuable, and so is theirs. So conflict in the workplace, professional development, and any other concerns. You know, but again, building rapport is a big part of this. So I don't know if you're the cat or the bald guy, but you guys need to figure out sort of a way to build a relationship, to come together. So for you, that probably means that you have to honor those meetings that you schedule. Allow some space and time for the relationship to develop. Don't expect people to not be skeptical if you first start this. Because, like, you're the boss. And they might be a little nervous about coming in and sitting down if you're not doing these now. So allow some time and space for that. It's okay. You don't have to rush through it. But again, you know, don't let them get too comfortable. Authenticity is really the key with these. And active listening is a given, you know, that you're not paying attention to the emails that are bonging on your screen or the text messages that are coming through on your phone. Have a few notes so that each discussion isn't like Groundhog Day. You know, if you guys talked about something last time, you know, and if their mother was in the hospital, ask about their mother, right? When you sit down, make sure that you've got notes about what you talked about last time. And motivations and goals may change over time. So don't assume that if you knew what their goals were when they started, that you know what they are now. Because maybe now they want to become an LVT. Or they want to go to college for something else. Or they want to become a veterinarian. Like, things change. And so, or have a residency. So once, you know, you get that information, you can shift what the professional development plan is based on that. So some sample check-in questions, and this would just be like if you didn't have any sort of, you know, primary goals. You know, what do you like about your job? If you could change anything, what would it be? What have you done so far to change that? What do you need from me to be more effective in your work right now? So that puts it back to them. To their responsibility, right? It's not your responsibility. You're not like bringing out your toolbox and fixing everything that bugs them. How do you feel you're clicking with your peers? You know, do you sense that there might be something like brewing on the floor and you don't really know what it is? How do they think they're clicking? How do you see the organization doing? This is great information for us. Are there any particular opportunities or problems you think we need to pay more attention to? Where do you see yourself heading from here in the future? What professional development do you need to achieve your goals? What are you doing to explore that? Not that you don't have any responsibility for it. You absolutely do as their leader to support them, but it's not your job to lay out a plan for them and drag them along through it. Discuss on-the-job or external professional development opportunities if you can. Not all of you guys can send people to a conference, right? And that's not actually the number, that doesn't even fall into the top 10 good professional development ways. It's important, it's supplemental, it's helpful. On-the-job learning is so much greater. And the key to those is make sure they understand why it's a professional development opportunity. There's a fine line between dumping work on someone or an unpleasant task on someone and a professional development opportunity. Give people work that's cool. Give people those plum things that you like doing yourself and let them have a swing at it. Don't give them the crappy stuff that you don't like to do, unless, of course, you're in the wonderful situation where they like the crappy stuff, which I have with one of my direct reports, which is great. But make sure they know how it relates, that they're with you on that. How does it relate to my professional development? How is this going to help me grow? Because if they don't, they could just look at it as you're shirking your responsibilities. And for you, what do they want from you? You know, I love having the answer. I'm this guy, Rorschach, if you're old enough to remember. Horshack? Horshack. Rorschach is a scientist. This is Horshack. I'm this guy totally. Like, I like solving the problem. I know the answer. I've been doing this for a long time. I can tell you exactly what you need to do, but I should not do that. And I know I should not do that. So what you want is to help them develop critical thinking. You want them to tease out the answers for themselves. And sometimes they have a much better solution than you, quite frankly. It does happen. Or together you come up with a better solution that either one of you could have on your own. So the magic words for us is, what do you think we should do about that? And fostering growth, this is what you want to do. Ask those questions and give them space to think and respond. And help them consider the bigger system if they're ready to consider the larger system outside of just their team. We're making this change, and I get that it's kind of stinks for you, but it really helps these guys. And the next time we do something like this, you might be the beneficiary. Help them understand. And reveal yourself. You're not perfect either. There's a lot of times where you can say, I screwed this up myself, and I had to learn the hard way. And those high-value questions are respectful, curious, not leading to try to get them down a specific path. Conveys that they're the expert in their own career, their own development. Those kinds of questions do that. Challenge them, provoke them, let them squirm a little if they don't know the answer to a problem or if they're blaming something else. Let them wriggle a little bit in their seat. It's okay. And this conveys, everything conveys that they're the owner of their own destiny. And for problems, what factors contribute to this problem do you see? What factors are those? What do you see as your role in this? Love that. When somebody brings you a big, hairy, ugly problem, what's your role in this? Ugh. I don't want my boss to ask me that, but it's a good question. If you could design an ideal solution, what would it be? How could I be most helpful right now? Not, let me take care of that. I'll talk to her tomorrow. I'm sorry she was incredibly rude to you. Let me fix it. How can I be most helpful right now? Because also they might not want you to fix it. You might love fixing stuff, and they don't actually want you to fix it. They want to vent, and then they want to work through it themselves. They don't want you to go, do this, do this, do this, because that disrespects their autonomy and their thought process. And then, are you open to hearing my candid views on this? If you really do think you can solve it and they're just wound around the axle, ask them for permission to solve it. And leader self-revelation. This can really help. What I believe, what I value, what I'm up against, what was my journey to get here? How can you follow some of the same things and not have to learn them all over again? What did I used to be like versus today? How did I get there? What I'm working on, what kinds of challenges I'm facing, what are my professional development goals? You know, it's fine to reveal your own self-performance management. And your philosophy of coaching, tell them why you're not going to just give them the answer. Tell them why you're letting them squirm a little bit, why it's so important that they're able to think critically and solve their own problems. That's how they get ahead in life. And you're helping them do that. You're not just delegating stuff because you don't have time or you don't want to do it, which, let's be honest, a lot of times people are going to go to that, the worst possible explanation, unless you spell it out. People don't always recognize something as a developmental opportunity when they see it, when it's confronted to them, unless you explain it and connect those dots for them. So based on your relationship with the team member that you were thinking about earlier, you can use this worksheet, or you can just use handwritten notes. We have these things called box notes that are online that are great. You can just keep adding to it, and they can get in and add to it. Those are really cool ways to keep track of your conversations. And always make sure that you include some recognition and praise that's specific. You know, what did you do that was great and why was it great? How did it help our organization? Think about that beforehand or you'll forget to do it once you're in there with them. Have a couple of check-in questions in your back pocket that you want to talk to them about in case they are just busy and hurried and they don't prepare when they come in. And then anything else that you think, gosh, this assignment, the last time we talked, they told me that they were really interested in this area, and I think that this assignment, being in charge of all of our supply ordering, is perfect because the person who was doing it is kind of done with it. So I'm going to play this out and see if they would like to do that. But it's a thing that you guys agree to together, right? These assignments, these developmental opportunities, if you have an idea for one, that's great. But agree to them together. Try not to just put developmental opportunities on them because you know what's good for them. Try to say, well, hey, there's this thing and then there's that thing. Like, what do you think? And let them pick. If they get to pick, they get like autonomy. Are they going to do a crappy job? Not on purpose. Not on purpose. They're not going to do a crappy job on purpose. They're going to do the best job that they can. And for you as their leader, you have got to, in one-on-ones and in your day-to-day, and even in your onboarding with that brand new person who's so excited, they need a lot of direction. Someone who's really seasoned but is hit a shaky patch, they need a lot of support. And it's all in between. You know, everybody needs a combination of direction and support throughout their career. And assuming that somebody no longer needs direction because they've been with you for 10 years or no longer needs support because they're their own, like they get recognition from their own just doing a good job, it can really hurt us over time. And you end up with that opening that you got to go back to the behavioral interviewing section to refill and start all over again. So it's really key, I think, to think about, am I giving for each new task that somebody's getting? Am I giving them the right amount of direction and support to set them up for success so that they can build and they can grow throughout their careers? And that will give you, hopefully, that high turnover position or that hard to fill position. If you could get an extra half a year or an extra year and reduce that turnover by 25%, 40%, that would be huge in time savings, productivity, client service, animal care, like you name it. There's all kinds of benefits to it. Thank you.